The 3-episode rule is something that all old school anime fans know about. You give an anime 3 episodes and decide if it's worth continuing. This gives the fairies a fair shot to hook you in without wasting too much time on something that you realistically won't really enjoy. And today, well, we're going to be covering Gungrave with that mentality. And let's find out if Gungrave, a classic, passes the 3-episode rule. Gungrave was created by Yasuhiro Nightow, the same mangaka behind a beloved series, Trigun, and Gungrave was released 5 years after Trigun. Gungrave explores darker themes with notable similarities. The first scene of the entire series opens on a highway. It shows a car with our presumed protagonist driving along until it suddenly isn't and is being overrun with these white creatures. I'm just going to call them fake humans because they look like the things from Fullmetal Alchemist. You know what I'm talking about. They look the exact same. These creatures are capable of morphing their bodies into any structure that they see fit, but they shatter into glass when they come into contact with Graves. A young girl calls out to Graves and calls him Brandon Heat as he is seen fighting these beings using his twin handguns. Cerberus. Right away, these scenes are really intense, with vibes similar to Hellsing. Graves seems to be almost unstoppable, but with a slight moment of weakness, hinting at a possible dark past and otherworldly power. Later, he's strapped into this mysterious machine that is either draining or injecting him with what seems to be blood, suggesting he's no longer a full human. And the fact his name is Graves makes me think he's undead. It's worth mentioning this now, but later on Graves does have another tool to his kit. Graves carries around a coffin filled with heavy weaponry. I'll get the specifics of what he pulls out later, but still, a coffin on his back? I'm pretty sure I've seen something very similar in Trigun. The story unfolds in a city beyond the reach of law enforcement. This is a rundown city with destroyed and dilapidated buildings as far as the eye can see. We meet Mika, a young girl who's being hunted by this so-called organization that these fake humans come from. Mika's father entrusted Graves, apparently, to protect her after both her mother and her father passed away, presumably murdered by the organization. But there seems to be a closeness between them. Very one-sided, but a closeness nonetheless. The cinematic climax of the episode features a standoff in a graveyard. Mika mourns her mother with Graves by her side, and they're ambushed by guards and more of these fake humans. Graves steps in, taking on an onslaught of gunfire, shielding her with his own body, and also proving that there is more than meets the eye with this guy. One of the guards then hulks out, morphing into this Hulk-like abomination that can turn his hands into weapons. Graves, assisted by the old man who brings him the coffin I mentioned before, makes quick work of the hulking guard by pulling out a light machine gun. The episode wraps up with the boss of the organization recognizing a photo of Brandon or Graves and stating that he's back and likely returning to settle a grudge. The mysteries around Graves' simple being and how he's capable of what he does are all somehow connected to Mika and Mika's mother. And for our first episode, that adds a lot of intrigue for a viewer. Also, the boss seems to have a past with Graves. The episode wraps up with the boss of the organization reminiscing about Brandon and Graves, as if he knows who he is. The organization themselves seem to all know who he is as well, seemingly thinking that he's the only thing capable of destroying this many Orgmen, as we now know. Episode 2 transports us to Brandon's past, where he's fully alive and part of a close-knit gang. Brandon is still quiet. In the entire series, hasn't really uttered a single word. We see his old friends, including Kenny, Harry, Nathan, Jolas, and a few other gang members. Harry takes charge in one scene, scolding Kenny for stealing a necklace that is too expensive to sell and too high profile. Then we're introduced to Maria, Brandon's love interest. The two of them share genuine affection. Then we're introduced to seemingly Harry's love interest, which in reality is him manipulating women to lending him money just so he can leave them. This only adds to the differences that these two characters share. Harry is very outspoken and charismatic, while Brandon is quiet and brooding. When Brandon is meeting with Maria, it's the first time in the entire series we hear him speak when he offers to walk Maria home, showing us a glimpse, I suppose, of his gentler side. The group's calm is short-lived though, when Kenny is kidnapped, forcing Brandon and Harry to take action. They return the stolen necklace in exchange for Kenny's freedom, Harry offering himself as collateral in whatever way she might see fit. She turns down the collateral and gets the gang completely beat to shit, but they all walk out of there alive. Nathan, Kenny, Harry, and Brandon all walk home with victory achieved in some capacity, but that relief is immediately shattered upon returning home.
Just one of you? How disappointing. Well, that's all right.
They find the gentlest of their friends shot dead. Jolas was shot in their own home. See, things actually happened earlier in the episode that I didn't want to mention until now, because it seemed this gang got into some trouble with a guy called Deed. They humiliated him and made him run home. It just so happened that Deed wasn't much of a big deal until his brother arrives home and is a fully fledged member of the mafia. This was Mad Dog Lad, and he does things far more violently than his little brother, and he doesn't plan on stopping there. This episode's pacing, as a viewer, feels rushed, but effectively introduces Brandon's gang and sets up for their relationship before what I think is going to be a betrayal. As I said, I believe that Harry, who we now know from the picture, is probably the boss that we know is the antagonist in the future, and that Brandon somehow turns into Graves. And this is probably the story of how that happens. And I think the tragedy of Jolas's death is what's probably going to start to drive Harry in that direction, while making Brandon realize the reality of his situation and start to deviate off on his own path. Brandon will probably see this as a betrayal, thus the future timeline. Episode 3 starts right where we left off, the backstory, and continues from the loss of their friend Jolas. After this, the gang realizes what happens and knows that Lad is back. Retreat to the sewers to avoid the mafia-led gang. This episode centers around the brutal aftermath as Harry's resolve hardens. Instead of hiding like the rest of the gang, Harry takes action and takes to the streets. Harry is soon beaten by Lad's rival gang, barely making it out alive. And to add to the tension, Dr. Takayama, who seemingly is connected to Brandon, is kidnapped by Lad. Meanwhile, Brandon attempts to visit Maria, but her uncle intervenes, giving Brandon money and telling him to flee the city. But a tense scene unfolds where Lad's thugs, but not Lad himself, confront them. But Maria's uncle steps in, shooting Deed's hand, disarming him, making them flee, but not before taking a fatal bullet himself. Lad was hiding in the shadows. Brandon's friends rally to rescue Brandon, but more tragedy strikes when Nathan, trying to intimidate the enemy with a fake gun he took from Kenny, is in return shot down by Lad. Kenny, mourning the loss of his close friend and feeling responsible for owning the gun, breaks down to his hands and knees and is soon after shot in the head. Lad has taken full control of the situation. Then another party arrives. Top-ranking executives from Millennium show up, led by a man called Bear. They were working with Lad, but they aren't happy with what he's done here. A dramatic showdown follows when the high-ranking executives from Millennium take action against Lad, ending his life. The executives kidnap Maria and leave. After the dust is settled, Harry and Brandon make their way over to Deed. Harry, overcome with the need for revenge, kills Deed, Lad's younger brother, in cold blood, showing Brandon a glimpse of the darkness taking root within him. Just some notes again. This episode solidifies Harry's motivations and hints at a descent into villainy of some sort. His revenge and grief foreshadowing his transition into the ruthless leader that we kind of know he's going to become from episode 1. Brandon's quiet care for Maria contrasts this with Harry's emotional intensity setting up for their eventual conflict. So they are the first 3 episodes in synopsis. I've got complaints, but overall, it's good. Episode 1 of Gungrave hooked me in right away with its stylish action and gothic atmosphere, and all of the compelling mystery around the characters. We're introduced to a world of supernatural enemies and cryptic characters, setting up questions like, how did Brandon become this way? Who is Brandon? Who is Maria? Who is Maria's parents? Who is this doctor guy? Who is the boss? You don't know anything other than the tone and the archetypes. However, I'm not the biggest fan of how they're explaining that. Episode 2 and 3 shift to a focus on Brandon's past, giving us these answers straight up, highlighting his gang life and, to be fair, complex friendship with Harry. The shift from the present day mystery, though, for me, takes away some of the oomph that mystery had. Instead of letting it linger and fester and inject it throughout the current story, we're just going to know all of the backstory. I took a little peek at the next few episodes, and they're all set in the past. But however, it leaves us more invested with the main characters of Harry and Brandon, leading into the overall plot. The 3 episodes builds a sort of layered story, one of loss, potential future betrayal, and the passage of time. So does Gungrave pass the 3 episode rule? Absolutely. These episodes lay down a strong foundation for the story that blends action and tragedy with a compelling main character and deep emotional stakes. There's enough to keep you watching, especially with only 12 episodes in total. While I don't personally love the shift to Brandon's backstory, it was certainly unexpected. While the shift to Brandon's backstory is unexpected, it's intriguing to see how it sets the stage for his and Harry's eventual confrontation. If you're into anime that delves into complex friendships, betrayal, and a bit of supernatural, Gungrave is worth your time.